waterlogged trenches. Trenches were dug to give soldiers protection from the opposite side. They would try to dig the trenches as high up as possible because they would dig into the sides of the hills. As soon as they would dig, water would have nowhere to go, and they would be in water all the time, and they would develop trench foot. This would make the men very depressed, and most of them would not want to be in the trenches anymore. They would always want to be out of the trenches. Their feet would also always be wet, and so were their socks, and they could not change their shoes or socks. Trench foot. Trench foot is caused from having your feet always surrounded by water and not being able to change your shoes or socks. 20,000 soldiers were affected by trench foot in World War I. The men's feet would become numb and the skin would turn blue and red. Many of the men would have to have their foot amputated. It was so painful, and the men would freak out because they knew that they were going to lose their leg, and they would also be sobbing. There was no treatment for men with trench foot. Many of the men did not realize that they had lost their foot when they woke up from surgery. After that, the men were ordered to change their socks and shoes twice a day and wash their feet with whale and dry them as often as possible. Trench rats. Men that were killed in the trenches were buried in the trenches. The bodies were food for the rats. The rats would eat the body's eyes and would go through the eye sockets to get through the body to the intestines. The rats could get as big as cats. The rats were also sneak food out of the pockets of the soldiers. To try to stop the rats, the men would try to kill them with their bayonets. The men could also see the rats burrowing through their dead bodies. Food in the trenches. At the beginning of the war, the men would get 10 ounces of meat and 8 ounces of veggies. But in 1997, the meat was cut back to 6 ounces and they were not given any vegetables. In the winter, the flour supply was so short that they would make their bread and biscuits out of dried ground turnips, and they would also have pea soup. They'd also get meat 3 out of